Welcome to the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast with your hosts, Dr. Frank Williams and Dr. Steve Snodgrass, MD, FACS, where we discuss a broad range of topics without limitations. Let's get to it. Here's Dr. Frank and Dr. Steve.
Hello, welcome back. This is the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast. I'm your host, Frank Williams. This is Steve Snodgrass. We're going to be covering a topic today which is prevalent throughout history and especially nowadays with the socio-political climates. It can be socioeconomic, it can be economic, it can be anything. But we're going to be covering the topic of stress, what it does to you, how it functions, and then some ways to possibly relieve stress. So as usual, I'll let Steve start off with the medical parts and his stories, and I'll jump in and give you the some statistics and some ways to alleviate it, the same as Steve will do. So we look forward to this topic because I think it's a much needed topic nowadays, since everybody's, no pun intended to the my mail carrier who I love to death, but we don't want people just going postal. So without further ado, Steve, go ahead.
Well, it's a very broad ranged topic for sure, but I feel like that we will cover this like it's not been covered before. But I'm going,
as we do with many of our subjects.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that we do that. We cover it like it's never been covered before, and I think that is it's a plus. But you see a lot of the same things, and I'm going to mention the usual and customary things, if you will, just because I think it's at least worth a cursory look at it. But anyway, stress. It's a state of mental or emotional strain resulting from perceived adverse or demanding circumstances. And again, how you perceive the situation is determining whether that's stressful or not. In many ways, but in other ways, obviously, it's obvious. But it's altered homeostasis, and homeostasis is just what the body is accustomed to, if you will, the foundation of your everyday kind of life. And when you look at the perceived threat, it's the hypothalamic pituitary axis. It's being mentioned. It will always be mentioned in stress, and people will look at it and say, well, I don't even know what that means, but we'll break it down into the fact that the hypothalamus is an area of the brain, and that's once that is stimulated in a stressful circumstance, the pituitary gland is called into action. It's it's an endocrine gland that sits right beneath the hypothalamus, and then it targets the adrenal gland, which sits right above the kidney, and it releases the stress hormones. And the stress hormones, I feel like that this has to be a part of it, just because it at least lays a foundation. But cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands, and that will increase glucose for energy, enhances the body's alertness, because we're talking about fight or flight kind of response. Growth hormone is stimulated. It also will increase muscle growth. Epinephrine and norepinephrine, adrenaline, if you will. Vasopressin is also another hormone that contracts the blood vessels and increases the heart rate, blood pressure, and will enhance the cognitive function to prepare the body for physical action. So, those are basically the fundamentals of what's involved in the stress reaction. And from there, I've got a few other different things to discuss, but I think it's a good time for you to jump right on in with some of the things you have to say, and then I will come in a little later.
Well, I mean, doesn't that cortisol also, that's got a lot of negative effects on the body, like your blood pressure, strokes, heart attack, all that stuff. And then, and I'll let you get into why chronic stress can lower the white blood cell production and all that. But let me ask you, is there a difference between good stress and bad stress, or is there such a thing?
Well, in the old days, if you're out and about or whatever, and you're getting chased by like a woolly mammoth, and your stress response is pretty good.
Yeah.
Because it's like it makes you your pupils are going to dilate. You're going to be more attuned to what's going on around you. So in those kinds of terms, stress can save lives. But as far as chronic stress, that's a whole nother issue. But I think a couple of times I've had it like 3 times in my life where I feel like you see things like this on television and you kind of wonder like where did that come from? But it's kind of true. But I got hit by a car on my bike, and when I got hit, everything slowed down. It was like you could just almost feel like your heartbeat, and your to me, like everything went to black and white. But I was like this hyper alert. Like I've just been injured, and so I'm actually looking around for any further stimulus that may hurt me. So it was one of the strangest experiences I've ever seen in my life. And I would say that is a ridiculous comment because you see things like that on television where everything gets black and
No,
white.
it happens. I've been in several, incidents involving shootings, stress with weapons pulled on me, handguns put in my face, shotguns, both, in law enforcement especially, but also in the military. And you're right. It's how because you almost feel like you can't move in a normal motion or fast, even though you are. It feels like everything is slowing down. You're almost slowing time down to the point where, you're the Flash or something. You can see everything just barely moving by real slow. And it's almost like it's out of control. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's happening in real time.
But it was the strangest thing because my brother was behind me and he was talking to me and the police were there, and it sounded like they were just talking in slow motion.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is the strangest experience that I think I've ever undergone. And but in that way, I felt like the reaction was extremely positive because you're looking around and it's like you are so hyper alert and hyper focused. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. So in that regard, yeah, I think that
there's a good stress.
There's a good stress because I think it can be life-saving.
Yeah, and chronic stress, like you said, ongoing stress over things is not good because, a lot of people grind their teeth. A dentist as a student, I have people, they'll grind their teeth because of stress, either work stress, home stress, financial stress, whatever it is, social stress, since everybody's on medications. And said, that grinding, a lot of times, it just it creates migraines and creates all kinds of issues. But there are a lot of ways, all you gotta do is turn the TV on if you want to create stress. Go to social media. I try and recommend people unplug as often. Just spoke with a gentleman last night about that and said, you work full time, you've got family commitments. You just need to make sure you cut off the electronics at a certain period, whether that be when you get home from work and you're with your family, spouse, where you don't need to be sitting around doing that. You just need to unplug, because that unplugging, and some people say, well, I watch things that make me laugh on the video, but you're still not. You're in a fake world. You're paying attention to things that are in a virtual reality realm. So you need to sit there and basically unplug. If it's sunny out or nice out, I don't care if it's cool like it is here in Bowling Green, Kentucky today. It's going to be 60 right now. It's absolutely gorgeous out, not a cloud in the sky, and about 30 degrees. But you can still go out and soak up, breathe in that fresh air and soak up that sun, which will help with your positive endorphins anyway. And vitamin D, is it, Steve? Yeah. And that'll cause those stress levels to go down. But like I said, everybody in the world is at bated breath and somewhat stressed, depending on the country, because of America's in a position right now and in the process of reshaping itself back to its original roots, in my opinion. I mean, everybody can vary on that. I don't want to stress over that. But the problem is people get so hyper sensitive and hyper political over everything. You know, if you've got things that were once a mental illness that are not now, but you're pushing them to be the norm and actually wanting to push them in school systems and in daycares and wherever else, even in some churches and some denominations, which obviously these people have never read the Bible properly, or they just don't understand it because it's very clear on these issues. You can stress people, then the people get stressed, then you have protests. The protests turn out to start to be for a cause. 99% of the people, I'm going to say from what I've seen and people interviewed, don't even have a complete grasp of what the topic is that they're protesting, which just cracks me up. I'm like, you have no clue what you're even protesting for. You're either getting paid or you're just showing up to protest to be protesting. And then you're going out, and I'll bring an example. And everybody has seen this, so I'm not bringing out anything new. I'm not telling you what side of the fence I stand on, even though I'm a constitutional conservative and an independent. That kind of lays the groundwork. But everybody's out there burning down Teslas and Tesla dealerships, and I watch where people are vandalizing Tesla vehicles. They're selling off, which if you're a politician and you bought a Tesla because you believe in the green agenda, and then you sell that Tesla and buy a gas guzzler, or you sell that Tesla and just to prove a point, you're an idiot. I mean, seriously, they've already made their money. And for those that are burning down the Teslas, you're not doing anything to harm these Tesla dealerships. Obviously, Elon doesn't need it because he's, worth $400+ billion, and several trillion.
He's worth a lot.
Yes, for these companies, but they're going to get their insurance paid for. You're all you're doing is helping them clean inventory off the lot, so then they can bring in new ones. And I will tell you that brand new, if it's the picture I've seen is correct, or the images of the brand new Cybertruck for 2025, it's an absolutely gorgeous. And I don't say it all because I thought the old Tesla truck was ugly. This one is really sharp. That's an A+ top notch there, Elon. And if you'd like to donate one, we'll be happy to drive it around to the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast, or any of the ones you've got, Tesla. We'd be happy to, promote that and drive it around. We're more than willing to do that to show that we care about the environment, and that we also care about, people not getting so political that they want to burn things down and because at some point somebody's going to get hurt. Because I'm telling you, and this is an opinion, from somebody in this podcast that is, you just need to, you're going to find sometime you're going to run into some armed security or some armed private contractors, and that's not going to go over well, because at some point they're going to have to, if they haven't already, they're going to have to start protecting those dealerships and the people inside them, because now if you're shooting or you've got rifles there, you know what? There's that term, fool around and find out. And I'm a big believer in that. I have agape love as a Christian for everybody, but meekness doesn't mean weakness. And so if you want to stay de-stressed, find some common ground, protest in a polite, correct way, so that you're not stressing out the whole country and the whole world, but you think you're bringing attention to yourself. And I'm just telling you, as a warning for those who are stressing over this, let it go. God's got it in control, and the side is on those who are trying to reestablish our constitutional republic, which is what we are, and not a democracy, because we're not socialist ran. You're going to find out that there are more people who are normal and more constitutionally conservative, as I say it, than there are those who are the 1% or a couple percent on the opposing side that are just, you're just freaking nuts. So
driving a Tesla around, like on some of these beautiful country roads and everything, could be a good de-stressor.
It could be, especially that new one. I mean, it's absolutely, that red one, that's gorgeous. Not that I'm giving you a color preference, Elon, if you send us one.
Well, he said it would outrun a Lamborghini.
That new one, yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I didn't realize that, but neither here nor there. But it's like I didn't know that.
Tangent. Now I will go back and give us some de-stressing methods before I get myself all stressed on the topic.
Don't get stressed.
No, don't. You know me.
Well, I got to tell you, by the way, and this is the thanks to you kind of thing, because I told you that I guess if I could be categorized maybe God's favorite heathen, I don't know. But anyway, I decided that, I'm going to read the Bible cover to cover. And I tried that several times and I just couldn't make it. But this time, I feel like I have made it past that incoming tide. Now I'm out there in the ocean. And so I'm reading it, and this is a weird thing, but actually I'm reading the Bible and then my wife wants to hear my interpretation of what I've read. And she said, like, I guarantee you that no one has interpreted the Bible like that. and I just said, well, I mean, I've got my own way of doing it. And I just said, like, but what's amazing is that Frank just will not allow me to teach a Bible study class.
No, that's not going to happen. And just for point of reference, I gave him a study Bible.
Yeah, and I am studying.
Yes, because it can provide him in his heathenist ways to.
Well, if you're gonna make commentary on things,
right?
If you're gonna make commentary, then I feel like that you should be well read.
Yes.
And if you're gonna make comments on religion, Christianity, or anything like that, then you need to read the source, and then you can make an educated comment. And so I truly am, like, if you were just sitting down reading that without studying it, you wouldn't get anything from it, because like when you sit down and look at everything, and I mean, I've got it to where like I even like look on the internet to see like where some of these places are on the map and those kinds of things. So I'm really getting into it. So it's taking me a while to get through it, but I am making the effort.
If I knows me and Jesus like this, hopefully we can bring him one.
Well, I'm just trying to say, like, okay, I'm going to read it, I'm going to study it, I'm going to get as much out of it as I can, and then I can make up my own mind about how I interpret things like that.
And it's important. So many, not just Christians, but on the topic of stress and all that, reading the Bible can actually de-stress you, just like reading in general, unless you're reading something that's works you up. But studying and knowing it, so many people. I mean, it's the most selling book in the world in history, the Bible, and so many people, can get into it. You can find all kinds of Bible verses for de-stressing and everything. The thing you want to make sure is that you don't just pick and choose what commentaries are backing up your mental, interpretation. I study it literally word by word with the people I study with, who are theologians, and they teach me. I learn something every week, and so shout out to Dr. Pettis and a few others. But I love looking at, like you said, finding out what other theologians said, what other historians said, what the actual words were, and how they were interpreted from Hebrew to Greek and Greek to English and all that, because sometimes there's misconceptions, sometimes there's not. And you can line 10 scholars up and all 10 of them have different opinions on it.
Yeah, well, it's really fascinating. And it's really probably like one of the first times I've paid real attention to it. I'll say that. So there we go. But anyway, one of the things I want to talk about that I've not really seen discussed too much is stress and sex. I haven't seen much discussed on that.
And this is the topic you told me you weren't going to tell me about ahead of time, but you would go ahead and just see my reaction.
Well, it kind of goes into a lot of different things, but stress and sex, and it's an interesting thing, and plus it's a very real thing. So we talk about cortisol, right? And some of the things the negatives of cortisol is that, it can lead to decreased libido and sexual function, can lead to decreased testosterone, impacting sex drive. So stress can affect the ability to become aroused, have erections, and have an orgasm. So there's one of your negatives of cortisol. So there's
Again,
that.
Any questions or comments? drfrankandstevepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and I'm just now getting started here.
I know.
Okay, now, everybody, the thing about this is actually, this is written up in a lot of medical texts and all that sort of thing, but it's not discussed all the time. So orgasms can help reduce stress. by triggering the release of hormones like dopamine, which is called the feel-good hormone, and oxytocin, which is the sex hormone, and they counterbalance the stress hormone, cortisol, and it can lead to feelings of relaxation and well-being. So you're Italian, right?
That's right.
And Richard Pryor goes over that in a thing that's very good, by the way.
Yeah.
It's very good in the whole thing, because when he talks about being with a woman and they have sexual intercourse and they're finished, and he says, if your woman after that wants to talk about computer components, well, then you're not finished. He said, but personally myself, I just want to go to sleep. And that, to Richard's point, there you go. This whole thing is called La Petite Mort, which means, it's French for little death, little death. So after sexual activity, you reach orgasm, can lead to improved mood and better sleep. And basically, La Petite Mort is just like passing out after sex, the state of euphoria. As Barry White calls it, when you reach that super feeling when you're making love. There you go. You're going to hear it all.
Oh, I know that.
No, you're going to hear it all. And I thought this was an interesting topic. They studied sexual behavior during the pandemic, during the COVID-19.
Well, I thought you were going to say in rats or something like
that.
that.
No, I think this was along the lines of humor. But the people that had an active sex life during the pandemic, and they actually studied this, had lower scores on measures of anxiety and depression. So there you go. It's good for you. And so the La Petite Mort is just an altered state of consciousness and transcendence that can accompany orgasm. So there's stress and sex in a nutshell.
All I can say is, again, drfrankenstevepodcast@gmail.com with your questions. If for you men that are watching, don't think you can go to your doctor and say, can you write a prescription for
La Petite Mort?
Yes. And make sure my wife fills it. Because you might end up with physical injuries versus stress.
And I've got other stress solutions I want to discuss, but you go right ahead with what you wanted to say.
Well, I'm just going to talk about, ways to relieve stress. Stress is found in everyday, lives. You've got, like I mentioned earlier, there's stress from finances, from, childbearing, parenting, taking care of a loved one or a parent as their caregiver. So the stresses are real, and then people work, and it seems like more and more people are working more, doing more, but with inflation and the economy, they have less to show for it, so that creates more stress on them. And one of the best things to do is just sit down, write this out. It's a psychological technique. Write down everything that goes on in your life. See how much time that takes in your life. Like, okay, work's taking 50% of my time during the week, and doing this and going to kids' baseball, softball, ballet, cricket, whatever, depending on the country you're in, takes another 40%. You can sit there and say, okay, now do these things, they're necessary, but what are things that are not exactly necessary that maybe I can cut back on or do differently or just cut out completely to relieve that stress? And it's the same way. A lot of people are afraid to tackle a lot of issues head on, so they stress about it, and it causes chronic stress until they do. And the best thing you can do, again, is take a journal, write down exactly everything that you're stressed about, and then separate them by page and write out, research, talk with loved ones, seek counsel and advice, and find ways to manage that stress or de-stress. And then as you start doing that, it becomes habit forming. And after you form those habits, you'll find that your stress level is about half. So some of the ways, there's several methods, excuse me, even the ones the Navy SEALs use, which is really just a ripoff of, which they took from, so it's not really a ripoff. It's a ripoff from the samurai, in my opinion, because of being, 50 plus years in samurai martial arts. But the Hindus and and several other countries, China, all use what's called like box breathing methods. And if you don't not familiar with the box breathing method, that's basically where you get in a comfortable position, you breathe in for like 4 seconds, and you hold it for 4 seconds, and then you exhale for 4 seconds. Then you hold that position for 4 seconds, and you can do that over multiple times, and it's supposed to just relieve your stress level and bring you back down to like normal heart rhythm. The samurai way is a little different. We do it because I think it's a ripoff of what we do, but that's neither here nor there.
It's quite
I don't want comments from all you yogis. Just stick with your Kalis and Shiva gods. What's going to happen? You get in a comfortable position. It can be a meditative position. This has got nothing to do with Eastern religion or any of that. You find a comfortable way to sit in a quiet area. It can be outside, be in your chair, or you can be seated in a meditative position, as the kids call it, crisscross applesauce, whatever works for you. You should have good posture, and your head should always be up for proper breathing so that you're getting proper airflow. You take a deep breath in, up to about 10 seconds. You hold it for 10 seconds, and then you release for 10 seconds. And then you repeat this 3 times to 4 times, depending on how you're feeling and your stress level. You may need to repeat this. But on the 3rd or final time, if you do it 4 times, when you breathe that in and you hold that for 10 seconds, then you want to swallow and then release it slowly for 10 seconds. And what happens is, as you're doing this, that's where the meditative part comes in. You can start imagining as you're breathing in, and then each time you breathe out, your shoulders are releasing down to your abdomen. Your abdomen's releasing stress down to your thighs are releasing down to your calves all the way down to your feet through your toes. And then once you practice this, you'll find where your body will start relaxing, your heart rate will start slowing down more, and become normalized, and it is a fantastic way to just de-stress. So I'll let you go on now, Steve, that I've given those couple so far.
So that whole thing about like just step back and take a good deep breath.
Yes.
There you go.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go through some of the more common things that people recommend. Obviously, exercise.
Right.
Obviously, exercise is just to me is one of the best de-stressors you could possibly do. And I ride my bicycle, and for that, being out in the sun, out in the country, getting your exercise, and you don't even notice a lot of the hills and wind and things like that because you're outside, and you're really kind of taking it all in.
So let me ask you, not to interject, but
what's going on?
Yeah, so that de-stresses you. Yeah. But have you ever thought, does it stress other people seeing you out there riding your bike in Speedos?
It may. But
I know you told me it stresses some dogs out, so.
The Speedo thing, you gotta wear the proper gear, or you get all those different kinds of saddle sores, this, that, all that sort of thing, all the bad.
Do they still call them Speedos, or are they Spanx?
Well, basically, it's a pair of shorts with chamois cloth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think we're becoming the world's largest population of Spanx wearing. Or
I just go ahead and uncheck you when you call me call me up for wearing Speedos, even though I'm really not. But I'm just gonna let you have your fun with it. It's okay. One of the big things too is to reduce stimulants, is to reduce caffeine, because if you look at the half-life of caffeine, it lasts a long time. And so if you're going to drink caffeine, I would say limit your caffeine to 1 to 2 drinks per day, and you have it before noon.
But I don't even do caffeine, and look at what it does to me. Could you imagine me hopped up on a bunch of caffeine?
Well, you probably need to be caged for a while. But but a lot of these people drink all this caffeine after 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, absolutely.
And like you see people out there for dinner having, coffee and all that sort of thing. And it's like, it's extremely disruptive. And
that's been built into our psyche since the dawn of time. Even when I watch old cowboy movies with my father-in-law, which he loves, everybody has dinner. Oh, we'll have our coffee in the front room.
Yeah.
And I worked with guys in law enforcement and the military. Depending on what mission or where we were at, depending on areas, these guys, and I didn't drink coffee, and I don't. These guys would drink a pot. And we had one guy that would notoriously probably drink a pot and a half to 2 pots of coffee a day, all the way through his evening shift. And I'm like, buddy, I don't know how you handle that, but I'd be bouncing off the ceilings.
And there's, I talked to one woman, and she was talking to me about diet and exercise and trying to try to get into healthier habits. And so I just started delving into her life a little bit, and she drank 12 Mountain Dews a day.
Wow.
I'm like, how could you even do that? I mean, I don't know, but there's there's a lot of that.
And that caffeine, like you said, can cause stress. And one thing we haven't brought up, but I mean, it is a psychological factor. You can stress yourself to the point your brain literally just shuts down, and you can't function right because you're so stressed out over that. And that's really not a good thing.
And nicotine is another one. I mean, with chewing tobacco, smoking cigarettes, and all that sort of thing, it's another stimulant. And the other one is sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And just to try to eat a balanced diet with more fruits and vegetables. I know everybody says that, but you really need to try to do that. And I mean, it's really kind of easy. I mean, I eat like raw.
It sounds easy.
It's easy for me.
Yes, it sounds
because I eat raw carrots, I eat raw cabbage, I eat raw, celery, that sort of thing. I just eat a lot of raw vegetables. So that's not so hard, is it?
No.
And if you have to, put a little ranch dressing with it. It's really just a flavor enhancer. So there you go.
And you can always use the 5 to 10 second muscle technique to de-stress too. Just like when you're doing those breathing exercises, if you tense your muscles in your body up and hold it for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and a lot of people say 5 seconds, but you can go 10 seconds and then try and fully relax. And you work this several times. Again, one of the secrets to this is, at least from the teachings that I've been taught for the last almost 56 years of doing what I do in the Japanese arts, is that when you do that, you're not just tensing up and relaxing. You're tensing up and then you're focused your mind on relaxing your body parts. And so you can do it individually, you can do it as your whole body, but you're constantly, as you go to relax and breathe out, is when you are concentrating on relaxing those body parts. And I didn't realize until I did all this research and talked to a couple, psychologists or students of mine, I didn't realize that so many of the old, like the stuff I've been taught since a child, these de-stressing techniques and methods are used to actually help enhance the brain power of some of the smartest people in the world when they're children, because they use them inside of the academies, inside of the study habits that they do. And they said, it's very commonplace. And I said, well, it's just, that's basically old breathing techniques. And many martial arts from around the world use, breathing techniques. You've got, like I said, the Hindus, the Chinese, the Qigongs. I'm sure there are a lot of quasi-religions and religions that use, breath techniques and all that. We don't use it that way because, as I said, being Southern Baptist and 10 Commandments hang right here beside me, that's a little different. But there's nothing wrong with doing meditative breathing, nothing at all. Especially if you're meditating on the Word or meditating on, prayer, family life. It's good to work those things through. And so if you're doing that while you're breathing and stuff, can help get rid of that stress while you're doing it.
Well, this is a little bit of an offshoot here. That's what we're talking about.
We just go anywhere up and down. We come back. We're kind of like Trump sometimes. I'm not endorsing Trump. I'm just saying we go off on these tangents, come right back around to the point eventually.
But here's something that I find interesting, because obviously I love the martial arts and been in it for a very long time, not as long as you, because you instruct me. So, not as long as you. So here's the question: you got like the Chinese martial arts, and you got, let's just say, for example, you got all these different what priests doing all this sort of thing. You got the Chinese martial arts, right?
Monks, yeah.
Right, and you got the samurai on the other side. You know, this is going to be like the ultimate UFC cage match. Who wins that fight and why? Samurai versus the Chinese martial arts. Who wins that fight?
Well, without getting me in trouble with our people, because we do have several people who are of the Chinese ethnicity that really like our podcast, I will just say I will go from a historical.
That's fine. However, I just want to see your professional and personal take on it, because I think that you are very well schooled in that.
Well, you know, we have schools around the world, and some of them are Chinese Kung Fu schools, so I don't knock any martial art. I think all martial arts are good. If that's what you're into and your body mechanics work for, I suggest you do it. I've always studied
you into this.
You did. I get asked this question all the time in different ways. But the samurai are the most undefeated warrior class throughout history, documented, period. You know, every culture and country has done atrocities to their people. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Americans with the Native Americans and stuff. Africans have done it to their own people. So there is no Indochina, the Middle East. There is no such thing as a perfect history with any country. However, given the parameters, and I'm going to be biased on this, and like I said, but the samurai being undefeated for a reason, and I've trained people through decades and decades, and they've utilized it. I'll just say that it has always worked for me, and it has always worked for others that I have trained that actually study. Now saying that, there could be a 85-year-old lady walking down the street who's a Philippine or Indonesian martial artist who's been studying longer than I have how to cut you with two knives. She might whip them butterfly knives out and ginsu me to death. However, that's unlikely, but it could happen. And I've always said, if somebody can do that, I'm humble enough to say, would you please teach me? I'll study under you privately. I don't care. But my personal opinion of the samurai was they like to think of things always in a multiple attack theory. Where most martial arts, as you know, because you've been in some different martial arts, everything's one-on-one. The samurai's battlefield, so everything is focused on multiple attack. We train our way of 5 to 6 attackers at one time coming at you, whether it's weapons, non-weapons, on the ground with weapons, and then how to pinpoint throw and be like a chess match, and that's the way the samurai have always done. They are the bad boys on the blocks, and people can say what they want. But if it's truly samurai martial arts, because they're jujitsu, or jujutsu as we say, the okoryo, which means old ways, they expect to fight anybody at a level that a lot of martial arts don't. A lot of martial arts assume that because you're studying, you're a karate man, whatever, and again, not making fun of it, but you're going to fight somebody one-on-one, and then certain things you do, your katas or whatever, your sparring, does multiple attack. I would say that that's rare. Where the true samurai jiu-jitsu arts, you are constantly, I'm not talking about Aikido or Aikijitsu, any of that. I'm talking about pure jiu-jitsu. It's stand-up, it's ground, it's multiple attack, it's weapons. So that's one of the most well-rounded martial arts in the world, and it is, even I've watched other people who create arts or who are experts in those different fields, one which you mentioned, the Chinese, even say those guys are the worst people to deal with in the world because they can normally handle about anything without thinking about it. So if that didn't answer your question, sorry, but
no, I mean, anatomically, I'm just looking at it from and I've said this many times, is that, and it's one of the reasons I'm so fascinated with it and I want to get involved with it, is because it's so anatomical. And I know this seems a little strange, but I feel like that I wanted to know the anatomy. I had to know the anatomy inside and out for surgery. I mean, you just have to. I mean, there's no question whatsoever. But to be an effective martial artist, you need to know that anatomy. So I felt like this is just a normal transition.
Yeah, because what you do is usually reconstructive, where we are deconstructive.
Yeah, it's constructive versus destructive.
Yes.
And it is, but it's like, but the knowledge of what you're doing is the same. It's just that one thing is putting it back together, one thing is taking it apart.
Yes.
And so I guess this is kind of weird, but I felt like I made my knowledge of the anatomy useful full circle, if you will.
Yes, no, I agree.
Yeah.
And he's very good at his martial arts. He must have a heck of a teacher. But getting back to the stressor, some of the things, and I've been in these situations where guys, I've just literally watched guys just freak out. Some guys that I want with me every time I go into any situation, but I've also had some that have just absolutely lost it and even desert me once after creating the fight with a couple of homeless people who were huge with weapons, and then take off and leave me. Of course, that person got 30 days off without pay and stayed away from me for about a month because I didn't want to.
You could have gotten 30 days
off. But in the de-stressing techniques that we teach, whether it's young children all the way up, they're good for test taking. You can use those same methods if you're taking a test, getting stuck on it at school or at work. If something's a problem, you do those de-stressors, and that'll help you focus your mind back on what you're doing. It's just like when we take on multiple attackers. People always say, there's no such thing. Well, that's because either you're an idiot or you don't know you're not really studied. But when we do multiple attack scenarios, instead of getting all stressed out, you learn those breathing exercises, and that's where the SEALs come in, and I give them props for that because they're some bad boys. You do these stressor breathing exercises, the Magosu breathing or samurai breathing for us, and it can actually, and this has been done because I've had this verified from Division I colleges and stuff, where we run people through where they're going to get attacked from 3 to 5 people, and it's controlled. But it's also their stress level, their blood pressure goes up at the beginning because they would put, or the scientists that came, put electrodes on them and measure oxygen levels, measure, pulse rates and all that, blood pressure, pupil dilation. I mean, they did it all. And they found that almost everything went up to critical levels because, there's books written on it where they tunnel vision. Yeah. I will tell you that myself, and I won't name the other person because he's about as skilled as I am. Our pulse rate dropped and our blood pressure lowered. And it's weird because it's a learned process, but it means that when you're getting in those fight or flight modes, and that could be something that people are facing all the time, in a bad work environment or the night shift or whatever, single mom, whatever. But you can learn during those stressful situations to instantly your body kicks into doing these de-stressing techniques, and it's going to help. I mean, and what we're trying to do is ultimately, and we haven't really talked about this, which has always been a pet peeve of mine, and you know this, Steve, I don't like seeing people just bombarded and flooded with medication all the time. I know people who are on, they call them happy pills. They're on, they're on pills for depression, pills for stress, pills for anxiety. And I'm going, isn't that the same pill? They're like, no, I take 1 or I take 3 pills, to do all this. And then I have to take a pill because it upsets my stomach. Then I have to take a pill for something else, and then the effects. And I'm like, man, we are becoming so medicated, as a nation. Yeah, we need to get back to just the simple way of de-stressing.
We're just becoming numb.
Yes.
But to me, and this is what I want to end my part of this discussion with, is that I went through and I watched a bunch of videos and read a bunch of things, and I looked at some of these people who are so-called experts in the whole thing of stress, if you will, and I listened to their whole thing of stress solutions and all this stuff, and I want to comment on it.
Well, feel free.
But anyway, I don't understand, and maybe you can help me with this, but I don't understand, when did we start talking? When did we start talking using these voice inflections and these cadence-like verbiage, if you will. It's like, I listen to this woman talk, and she's like, I'll try to do it if I can, but it's like, you must, like, sometimes I will take my patients and we'll go out to the park, and I just want them to feel the tree. I want them to feel the stream. I want them to hear the stream. And just because so many times we just don't let go. And so we
Now, these aren't like certified experts, are they?
Oh, they're MDs. Now that I'm listening to it.
Mostly dumb?
I mean, I'm like, one's like, we must become one with the universe, see what the universe is trying to tell us. And then a lot of times I'll take my daughter and she will become involved in the treatment plan. And I'm just like, I'm listening to it. And I hate to say this. Because, it's just, I just hate to say it. But it's just so much bullshit. I can't stand it. I just can't stand it.
Are you going to say something I'm going to have to edit later?
Maybe. But I'm just saying, the de-stressing.
I can go for the bull.
The de-stressing stressed me out. And this is here's one of my takes on things. Is that one of the reasons that stress is such a problem is, and I think it's, if you look at it and you analyze it, you self-analyze, one of the reasons that I think there's so much chronic stress is because you as an individual, you went against your nature on something. It's like, and it can last for decades. You can have one event where you go against your nature, and it's a decisive moment in time. We live with the decisions we make, right?
Right.
And when you go against your grain or your inner being to a certain extent, that causes so much stress. And I think that now, if your way of de-stressing is to go set Teslas on fire, now obviously that's not acceptable. But I'm just saying, like, this one was talking about all these different chants and these different things, and like, all this transcendental meditation and all this sort of thing. Now, in my past life, I feel like I may have been a Maharishi, because I've got my own mantra here. And here it is. I've got two.
Is this something I'm going to have to edit out later?
No, I think you'll like it.
Because the last thing I'm going to cover is statistics on some of this stuff, and then
I think you're going to like it,
okay.
Actually. And you can actually, if you want to, you can use it. Okay, I'm not going to charge you for it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
But you sit in your position, right?
Yeah.
You sit in your position, you're cross-legged, whatever you're doing, you're taking your box breathing, and then you say this mantra. Maybe a couple of thousand.
Is this a mantra you cleared with your wife?
No, she doesn't know that. But this is very simple, but it's complex at the same time. Okay. I'm really building this up, all right?
Yeah, I know you are.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't wait on. I've got beta
okay.
On this.
Now, it's along the lines of the video I saw, of the video, but I'm just saying, without a state of being, you cannot be. So that's one. And the other is, for me to be me, sometimes I just need to be. How about that?
Now, I think I heard similar phrases, so you might want to check the copyright, because somebody just ran for president that sounded just like that.
I don't know, but I didn't take it from anybody. I just sat around thinking about, like, okay, I've identified one big chronic stressor, and to deal with that, this mantra, if you sit there and practice that mantra, I think that you will be healed.
Well, that's one part of research I want to worry about.
And it's like, now this is not medical advice, obviously. But in the other thing too, now this gets down to it, because that, to me, what I listened to was just this woke, and I won't say it again.
Yeah.
But you get
bull.
Well, anyway, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
But it's behind multiple.
Yeah. And so anyway, so I'm going to say this, and this is the way that I look at it, is that sometimes you just have to let out your inner werewolf, if you will. You have to just like howl at the moon and just let it all out. And so I think that inner beast, and you can do it without hurting someone else or anything like that. But fighting there, you have to know, and I know because I used to fight in sport karate before I met you. I was 30 some odd years old, and I was fighting these kids 20 some odd years old as well. And like that's a hyper focus, that's a de-stressor. And then but my disability insurers made me quit doing that. So, and I didn't get hurt, thankfully. But anyway, they made me do it. But so I think a good title for this episode is The Werewolf Meets Dr. Frankenstein. And then you just take that and run with it any way you want.
Yes.
And I'm done.
Okay. Thank you. So now I'm going to cover some boring parts just for a second before we go. Just to give you a scope of how much of a problem, stress is becoming in big pharma being pushed on this. Bobby Kennedy, again, we're more than happy to sit with you because we have ways you can save between $1 and $3 trillion over a 10-year period in healthcare costs. So Bobby Kennedy, please get in touch with us at your earliest convenience. We'll go with our healthcare savings model that we created. But looking at adults and the increase, because now, as I said, and we need to do a podcast on this, about how you could just go right on your phone and on your computer, your laptop, your tablet, you can get in with these, I don't know what they are, what their certifications are, what their backgrounds are. You're on there for 10 minutes maybe, and all of a sudden they're giving you prescriptions or sending you prescriptions legally for antidepressants, anxiety medicines, you name it. Mental health is becoming it is quadrupling the number of people that are getting on medications. You got about 22% of adults are on medications at a minimum right now for like mental health treatment and antidepressants. And women actually are almost, they're almost 10% more than what men are. So we're really stressing out the ladies. And as far as children go with mental health conditions, they find that it's somewhere between 13 and 20% of children. Now, children, we're talking about the ages of 3 and up, or it's about the 1 in 5 children are diagnosed with a mental behavioral disorder or condition like anxiety, depression, all that stuff. And so if you've got about 10 to 20% of the kids starting to become stressed out, you got to take a look at that lifestyle, maybe lifestyle change those children and yourself. And I know that it was exacerbated because we had COVID-19, everybody was shut in during the pandemic. We're 5 years on now. And as Steve said, you got to get in touch with your inner werewolf. And you just got to deal with that head on and say, this is what, if nobody likes it, I don't care. This is the decision I'm making after research, prayer, counseling, expert advice. That's legitimate, like going and taking your daughter to figure out if you both can become a tree and a sapling, which is ridiculous. Okay, again.
Well, I've got before we go, I have a biblical question I must ask you before we go.
That's fine.
Okay.
You got teenagers feel academic pressure, over 50% of them do. Bullying, it's almost 40% of all parents, to 42%. Worry about bullying and social acceptance and interactions of their children in school. And because of that, it's about 64% of all parents believe their children aren't living or becoming their full potential because of the stressors that those kids are actually going through in their life, socially, and academically. So we need to just, like Steve said, step back, relax, or try and relax, try and, de-stress some and just go on. I think we'd be a happier, healthier nation by far.
Yeah. You ready for your question?
Yes, I am.
Okay. This is like, maybe an oversimplification, but when I'm reading about like the Middle East
Yes.
and wars and all this kind of stuff, it seems like uh, this is like even in like 500 and 600 BC or whatever, and they're talking about wars going on in what, like modern day Lebanon,
Yeah.
all that sort of thing. So I mean, like, this has been going on for
Eons.
forever. It's been going on forever, and it's just like, to me, why do you want to live like that? Because that day in, day out, that's stress. I mean, like, that's just, and it doesn't end. It's just like never ending. I do believe that we are on our way to maybe finding peace there, that we haven't had a chance to do that before. But my point is this, is that if they might ought to try having more sex over there, because le petit more, if you're in that mode, maybe you just don't want to go bomb everybody all the time, or prevent, or do all these terrorist acts. So instead of doing that, why don't you just spend some time with your significant other and not maybe go blow that school bus up? Your thoughts?
First of all, I don't know how you equate that to the Bible. But that's okay. And
I'm
I
just
do
saying
want
it's
to
been
I do
going
want to
back.
preference this in saying those stats that I just gave you are from the CDC, NIH.gov, the Wall Street Journal. There are several. The Houston Chronicle had some that doing that about pandemic and students. 5 years later, there was an article. So just so I make sure that everybody knows where that stuff's coming from. But you're right. Some of these things are you just can't. We're a fallen world, which is what I believe as a Christian, and it's proven. We started falling after Eve talked Adam into eating the fruit, and Adam and Eve fell. So, and as far as wars, people are going to hate because they want to hate. Israel's gone through this, and I'm not taking anybody's side. Hamas, you see these people stressing, and then they create stress. If Hamas is so great, why are you taking all the food and the aid and actually not giving it to your own people, which is causing stress? And then they're hating Americans and they're hating Israel, and those people, those little children grow up now thinking the one thing that I need to do, I have to bomb Israel. I have to bomb the U.S. and get rid of the Great White Satan, or kill. What was it? Kill White Devil, as you used to say.
Kill White Devil.
Yes,
Kill
and
White
so
Devil.
that goes on, and it's not just they get into it with themselves. You would think for economic reasons, some of these countries used to be the premier countries in the world back in the day, in ancient times.
Yeah.
I mean, they were globally some of the richest nations. Now they're some of the poorest nations, and it's all because of that greed, that strife, that stress. And so, like Steve said, this is all going to happen, one, because we're a fallen world and we just can't get our act together. Everybody's got to either be the next big viral sensation, or that's why don't forget to watch the rest of our Dr. Frank and Steve podcast series, or they've got to find ways to be offended, because you create stress on yourself if you walk around all day like you see with people who just looking for things to be offended. You just hate, and I say this to both sides, so right and left, you just hate because the person's at an opposite party from you. You can't do anything that's good. You are a complete moron if you think that, and I have agape love, so I believe if you come here legally, the ones who are working, that's illegal immigrants, and we've talked about this before on podcasts, if you can find a way to assimilate, and the U.S. is not going to kick you out. I think we should find ways to incorporate you into the U.S. But if you're an evildoer, or a violent gang member, or a criminal, you need to be booted. And for people and some of these ridiculous judges to say, or people, no, we need to keep them here and protect them and let them be here until we figure out if it's true. I got news for you. If you got gangbangers and you say, well, I don't know if those guys are actually gangbangers. If you're an MS-13, Agua, whatever the gang, Bloods, Crips, if you're just a normal person and you're a wannabe and you're going to put gang tattoos all over you, you're not the brightest person in the world. Because if you're not part of that gang, they're going to kill you, for going there trying to imitate them.
Yeah, not to mention, They must not have seen our podcast on tattoos.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just like,
Absolutely.
you know what? You need to watch that.
But these people are pretty well vetted to be, terroristic, and so they need to be deported. If you don't have borders, you don't have a country. America's big enough to welcome everybody that comes here legally. Because we need the brightest and the best, and even if you're fleeing persecution, we're here. Do it the right way. And I will say the only reason I bring it up is because of the stressors, as you were just saying. These people are fleeing some of those areas, but the people in those countries need to find voices and need to find people who can lead them to stand up and stop that stuff and correct it.
There we go.
So that's all I got to say on my tangents today. And, I feel de-stressed even talking about it.
I feel much better. I feel like the weight of the world has been lifted off of me because of this podcast. And I think it's because I just said my mantras. I just said them one time and I feel much better already.
Well, you go ahead and put those on t-shirts and coffee mugs if you will. And I'll do what I do. So until next time, as always, stay healthy, stay safe. We'll see you. Thank you for watching.
See you later. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit follow or subscribe on the link provided so you can stay up to date on new episodes. Until next time, stay healthy and stay safe.